Welcome to the Doggy Dutch Audio Stories, where weekly card readings open into reflections on manifestation, systems, sovereignty, and everyday life. Brought to you by the Etsy shop Alchemy of Me. The line is not the limit coloring book and the walking the universe ecosystem for manifestation. Episode 13. Have you ever felt apprehension arrive when something good did, because you felt fear that it was about to end soon? This episode is for such moments. The title for today's story is Swaying in the Hammock.
Dutch has been reflecting on his social justice and manifestation oracle card pull. A reading drawn using the cards inside his Walking the Universe coloring book and his The Line is Not the Limit coloring book. Available from Amazon and from the Etsy shop Alchemy of Me for instant download.
The cards in the reading were Rekindle the Flow of Light, Rediscover Joy, Surrender Resistance, and Emerge Exquisite.
Dutch has been letting the reading sit beside him, carrying the cards quietly, and noticing when they speak.
One warm afternoon, Dutch lay in a hammock, swaying gently. As he rocked, his thoughts drifted, as they often do. The back and forth made him think of the ocean, the way waves arrive, how the waves build and break, how the ebb and the flow are not opposites, but instead make one continuous movement, and how waves recede and return.
That made him think about his finances, about how money had recently started flowing his way. And almost instantly, he felt the fear arrive.
He could feel it underneath the flow, an anxious hum, his nervous system waiting for the ebb, because it had ebbed before. More than once, the flow had arrived and then receded. His body remembered that pattern, and he could feel his body bracing.
As he rocked, the hammock's back and forth left him wondering why he could not rest in the flow.
As he held that question, the hammock swayed in the breeze, and his mind moved back to what he knew of history.
To communities whose abundance had been interrupted.
Communities whose land had been taken.
Communities whose labor had been extracted without return.
Communities whose access to stability had been legislated away before it could take root.
And to communities whose thriving had been repeatedly and systematically dismantled without care or apology.
Unlike the ocean's waves, that ebb had not always been natural.
It was engineered by systems.
When flow had arrived, it had been taken before it could settle. Systems had interrupted what could have become stability. They interrupted what could have compounded, and systems interrupted what could have been passed on. Loss wasn't always a phase. It was enforced.
Dutch realized the bracing in him was his body paying attention to history. He reached for the affirmation language he had found for moments like this one. Not to replace the fear, to accompany it.
Affirmations like, I am the abundance, and abundance is my nature, not a moment that has passed.
He held those words as the hammock continued its movement, and his mind swung toward manifestation teachings. Teachings that included affirmations among their tools.
Teachings that said, the right words, held with the right belief, would sustain abundance.
And teachings that said believe before the evidence arrives. Embody the version of yourself that already has it. Those teachings also said if it hadn't arrived, or if it had arrived and then left, he was the block. His unbelief. His failure to embody correctly. Such teachings always asked what the person did wrong.
But they didn't ask what had shaped the situation in the first place. They didn't ask what the body carried from history.
They didn't ask what had been extracted and taken, before the person ever had a chance to align.
They didn't ask what blocked the flow.
Instead, the teachings issued a directive to the person, commanding them to embody the version of themselves that already had it, to live and vibrate as if.
But that instruction made an assumption. It assumed that a felt sense of having it was available.
That there was an ancestral memory of thriving to call upon.
Or a reference point from a body that had been permitted knowing. But for those whose abundance had been interrupted before it could compound, before it could be passed down, before it could fully become a lived experience, those reference points may never have existed.
And the teachings didn't ask
how a person embodies what has been denied to them.
How a person finds their way to a feeling their ancestors and community were never permitted to settle into.
Or how a person vibrates as if, when there is no lived experience to draw from.
Instead, they labeled the system's historical wounding as a personal block.
They ignored the possibility that what they called blocks were not personal, but constructed.
And they handed more effort back to the individual, directing them to address harm, wounding they did not create, and are still navigating.
Dutch saw that in doing so, they left the systems that produced wounding entirely undisturbed and enabled them to continue harming.
Dutch lay in a hammock with both the weight and clarity of his thoughts, and then his thoughts swung somewhere else, not away from the weight, but deeper into it, to communities that had survived what should not have been survivable.
Communities that had carved out joy despite the margins.
Communities that created beauty from interruption.
Communities that had kept the light burning through every system-generated ebb, not because the system had relented.
It definitely hadn't.
But because something in them refused to be extinguished. And in doing so, they had found more than survival.
Dutch wanted to live this legacy from his ancestors.
He wanted a life that had joy in it, light in it, and thriving in it.
He wanted to feel and embody what his lineage had fought to make possible, even with the system still at work.
He realized that this wanting was not misalignment.
It was a remembrance of what was already his, passed down through every person in his ancestry who had found joy despite,
Who had kept the light burning despite.
and who had emerged exquisite despite.
It was an inheritance. A heritage he felt beside him through the cards. He felt it in the card rekindled a flow of light that spoke of not creating something new, but returning to what was always there.
Through the card rediscovered joy. He could feel the message of not performing happiness over fear, but instead finding again what his lineage had always known was possible.
He felt it through the card surrender resistance. That spoke to him of releasing the grip of fear the systems installed. Not releasing awareness of the fear, just the grip.
And through the card emerged exquisite. He could feel the fullness of what he already was. He was exquisite, just as his ancestors were, just as his lineage had always been. Dutch lay in the hammock, still rocking, and the fear was still present. He wasn't pretending otherwise, but something else was present too.
He thought about the ocean, the way waves arrive, recede, and always returned. The unbreakable consistency and inevitability of nature.
A phenomenon older and more enduring than the systems that tried to interrupt the flow.
Older than the extraction of systems.
Older than the system, and its intentional receding of the ebb.
The system could repeatedly interrupt the flow of its resources.
It could uncaringly engineer its ebb.
It could knowingly take what it gave before it could settle.
But there were flows the system never had dominion over. Cycles of return older than any system built to interrupt it. And his lineage had known that, had lived inside that knowing, even when everything around them was designed to make them ignore it.
In that moment, Dutch felt his inheritance swell.
The strength, the joy, and the resilience of those who came before him. Their light and thriving flowing to and through him, as consistent and undeniable as a return of waves. And he found grounding there, not in the system's pattern, but in what moved beneath and beyond it.
Dutch let the hammock rock him, with the same back and forth motion of the ocean and its waves.
And he let himself rest there. The end. If something in this met you, take a breath with Dutch and let it simmer for a moment. Let's breathe in. 4, 3, 2, 1. Hold together. 4, 3, 2, 1. And now we exhale. 4, 3, 2, 1. Thanks for listening. Until next time, keep noticing what reveals itself along the way. And remember, if you would like to perform your own readings, the Thesis of a Social Justice Oracle cards and the Metaphor for Life Manifestation Oracle cards are available for print and immediate download from the Etsy shop, Alchemy of Me.